Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the luxurious living room of a lavish Los Angeles villa, Margaret Sinclair, a woman of icy elegance and influential mother, observed her daughter-in-law, Jasmine, with barely veiled contempt. Jasmine, a brilliant young lawyer, had married Margaret's only son, Daniel, and from that day forward, every encounter with her mother-in-law seemed like a silent duel where Margaret's arrogance and cruelty served as weapons. That evening, Margaret had organized a lavish dinner, ostensibly to celebrate Daniel's birthday. But her intention was clear: to humiliate Jasmine in front of all the guests. Between the stifled laughter and knowing glances of Margaret's influential friends, she launched her first attack, subtle but devastating. She criticized Jasmine's outfit, mocked her accent, and openly questioned her ability to fit into their prestigious family. Daniel, stunned and helpless, didn't know what to say. Jasmine, hurt but dignified, remained calm, clenching her fists under the table. The guests, initially uncomfortable, began to murmur, some surprised by Margaret's outburst, others too frightened to intervene. But what no one knew was that Jasmine wasn't just a loving wife and a talented lawyer. She was about to show everyone that you can't humiliate a woman, especially a woman who has nothing to lose. And when Margaret launched her final attack, believing she had broken Jasmine for good, an icy silence fell over the room. The air seemed frozen. The whole world, through the eyes of the witnesses, held its breath, unable to believe what had just happened. For Jasmine had a plan, a twist that would leave Margaret and all the guests completely speechless. The next morning, Jasmine woke up in her room bathed in the soft light of the Californian sun. Despite the anger simmering inside her, she knew that acting impulsively would be a mistake. She thought long and hard, analyzing every cruel word Margaret had said, every condescending glance, and every stifled laugh from the previous night's guests. She remembered her mother's lessons: strength lies not in anger, but in self-control and strategy. Jasmine then decided to transform her humiliation into a methodical plan. She discreetly contacted a few influential friends in the legal and media circles, respected individuals capable of lending weight to her position. Meanwhile, Margaret strutted around the garden, proud of having put her daughter-in-law in her place. But behind her smile, a tension was beginning to surface. Daniel, the son, felt an unusual unease. For the first time, he wondered if his mother had gone too far. Jasmine, for her part, took meticulous notes on every humiliation she suffered, every word she uttered in front of the guests. She knew it would all be useful later. And when she went to a business meeting later that day, she was calm and focused, but the spark of revenge already burned brightly in her eyes. The world around Jasmine continued to turn as usual, still unaware of the silent hurricane that was brewing. But soon, Margaret would discover that beneath Jasmine's tranquil exterior lay an unstoppable force, ready to transform humiliation into a lesson no one would forget. In the days that followed, Jasmine pretended to return to her normal life. She smiled politely at Margaret during dinners, exchanged a few kind words, and avoided any direct confrontation. But behind this facade of calm, she was plotting her revenge with surgical precision. She began by leveraging Margaret's social media and professional networks. Jasmine subtly shared success stories and impressive projects she led, highlighting her skills and influence. Every post, every article, every media mention boosted her reputation, and slowly but surely, Margaret's inner circle began to notice Jasmine's brilliance. One evening, at a reception hosted by Margaret, her stepmother once again tried to belittle her in front of her influential friends. But Jasmine, armed with her composure and newfound confidence, responded with elegance. She transformed each barb into a demonstration of her intelligence and poise. Her words, measured yet powerful, silenced Margaret and left the guests speechless. Daniel, watching the scene unfold, felt a mixture of admiration and guilt. For the first time, he realized that his mother wasn't invincible. Jasmine, on the other hand, felt liberated. She understood that humiliation could be turned into strength when one kept a cool head and acted strategically. That evening was a turning point. For the first time, Margaret felt a wave of unease. The whispers among her friends were subtly changing, the once inferior daughter-in-law now seemed to be in complete control, without fanfare, but with undeniable authority. Jasmine had just laid the first stone of her revenge, and she knew the world would soon be speechless at the rest of her plan. A few weeks later, Margaret still believed she was in control. She continued her subtle criticisms, her contemptuous glances, and her humiliating remarks, thinking that Jasmine would always let herself be dominated. But she was sorely mistaken. Jasmine, aware of the impact of social media and the power of influence, decided to strike where it hurt. She organized a charity gala in the most prestigious neighborhood of Los Angeles, inviting all of Margaret's influential friends, colleagues, and partners. The stepmother, convinced that Jasmine would be intimidated by such an event, agreed to attend, ready to observe and judge her. But from the moment she entered, Margaret sensed the change. Jasmine, dressed with understated yet radiant elegance, exuded confidence. Every guest greeted her with admiration, highlighting her intelligence, charisma, and philanthropic talents. Margaret, sitting in a corner, tried to hide her discomfort, but her smile began to crack. When it came time for the speeches, Jasmine took the floor. Without a trace of aggression, she spoke of success, integration, and leadership, while also paying tribute to her own strength and journey. Every word resonated deeply with Margaret, making her feel uneasy. The murmurs among the guests turned into admiring whispers for Jasmine, and Margaret felt the weight of the world's gaze upon her. Daniel, standing beside his mother, could no longer contain his astonishment. The woman he had thought fragile and timid had just shattered his mother's image of superiority. And when Jasmine concluded her speech with an elegant and confident smile, the icy silence in the room spoke volumes. Margaret had just lost control, and for the first time, she understood that the humiliation she had inflicted could never work again. That evening marked Jasmine's true revenge, discreet, strategic, but ruthless. Margaret was no longer the dominant figure she had been. She had just discovered, to her cost, that underestimating a woman can have explosive consequences. A few days after the gala, Margaret was still brooding, unable to understand how her daughter-in-law had turned the situation around. She thought she could still salvage her image, but Jasmine had planned the final blow. Jasmine invited Margaret and Daniel to an informal family gathering, claiming she wanted to strengthen their bonds. Margaret, trusting and slightly disdainful, accepted, believing she was still in control. Family and a few close friends were present, but Jasmine had prepared a surprise, a video montage retracing her career, her achievements, her charitable work, and, subtly, the humiliations she had endured, presented with elegance and intelligence. When the video started, Margaret felt a shiver run down her spine. The images showed Jasmine at the height of her success, radiant, respected, and admired by everyone who mattered in their social circle. The murmurs of admiration turned into genuine applause. Every viewer now clearly saw that Jasmine was not only capable of success, but that she had transformed every hardship, every humiliation, into strength. Margaret tried to intervene, to downplay the situation, but her words were lost in the echo of applause. Daniel, proud and impressed, stood up to support Jasmine, declaring emotionally that his wife was a source of inspiration and pride. Margaret's face turned ashen. The entire world in that room now saw her daughter-in-law not as a target, but as a true victory over the cruelty and subtle racism she had endured. Jasmine, smiling but resolute, extended her hand to Margaret, not out of pity, but out of moral superiority. "I never meant to humiliate you. I only proved that dignity and strength cannot be broken by words or contempt." Margaret remained silent, unable to reply. Jasmine's revenge was complete. And as the room erupted in applause, Margaret understood that underestimating a woman of such dignity had been her most monumental mistake. The world, witnessing this scene, was truly speechless.